Welcome back to the Politics of Sport, Sport of Politics podcast. I am your co-host, Jeff Embler, along with
Jonathan Grella.
And we've got a breaking news edition of the pod. We're rushing out the door today to talk about this Adam Schefter situation that broke yesterday. Been talking to a lot of people about this as communications professionals. And in particular, we're going to talk to Grella about this because of his background working in the NFL. And what are your initial thoughts about a sports reporter sending a full draft of his story to a team executive for their thoughts on the story?
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts on this. They don't fit neatly into one box, as I'm normally media bashing and a stickler for journalistic ethics, which are all too often a subpar these days. All right. Here's the thing on Adam. He's a really good man, and despite the fact that he is a really good man, he's still going to have a lot of haters. Why? Because he's great at what he does. We all know that as adults, that there's the Marsha syndrome out there, and Adam is the pace car. So he's going to get people are going to take their shots when they get a chance. The nature of what he does, functionally speaking, is he's an information broker, right? I mean, they exist in politics and sports and other fields. It is by nature pretty transactional. The reason, there are several reasons why he finds himself in people's crosshairs right now. And I'll try to run through those real quick. First of all, and this is where I get to bash the media a little bit and scratch that itch, which is a lot of reporters would rather complain than compete. So they see something like this, and it's their way of doing what most people and Americans are doing nowadays, especially on social media, which is try to deliberately misunderstand one another and deliberately try to disqualify anybody they don't like, especially those who have more than they do or are more successful. So the truth of the matter is, as somebody who is not best friends with Adam, but has worked with him enough to know his style and how he stacks up against a lot of other sports reporters and political reporters, is that simply he's not some entitled dick, right? He plays it straight. He's unfailingly polite. When you have bad news to share, your quarterback, tore his Achilles and is out for the year. Your star cornerback just got suspended for substance abuse. Adam handles with care. He doesn't add a little spice on top, a little dash of Tabasco on top of the bad news. You give him the information, he shares the information. That's why people keep coming back to him, because a lot of other reporters, and I've seen this plenty of times, will gripe about folks like him. Why are you, and they used to say this to me, why are you going to a national source and bypassing your local media? And you go, because he's not gonna editorialize. He's not gonna kick us when we're down. And there's room for that, right? Just the facts, ma'am. And that's why Adam does a good job. Bedside manner wise, he's unfailingly polite, as I mentioned. He always says please and thank you. He doesn't try to give you attitude. He doesn't act like he's entitled to your scoop. And he always handles it with care. So I'll just take a breath for a second. Jeff, if you wanted to jump in with question number two.
Did you give yourself a thumbs up?
I just saw that happened. I thought that was you giving me a thumbs up or asking me to shut up for a minute.
Maybe someone's hacking us and they gave you a thumbs up for great commentary.
Right.
No, I've never had a reporter send me a full draft of the story. I will say that. I've had a reporter send me.
Because when we worked in politics, we weren't Democrat press secretaries.
Well, I've had a reporter send me some relevant passages of a story to prepare for when the full story had dropped on my boss's head. I mean, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here. I know using the term Mr. Editor sounds a bit obsequious, to me, this might have been an attempt at what the kind of thing that happens off the record, where you get licensed to your full complete take is solicited by a reporter to shape their story. I've certainly, we've all done a lot of that kind of talking. Also had set up off the record briefings with policy staff for a whole room full of top shelf reporters who listen
Sure.
to a policy staffer walk through, obviously, my boss's point of view on major legislation. And again, it was in this, like with the lockout, it was one situation like that that comes to mind for my career, was when there's a very complicated piece of legislation coming to the floor.
Yeah.
And a type of legislation that hadn't been done in a long time. There wasn't a lot of institutional knowledge among staff or reporters about the process. But that was a hour-long stem winding session for the reporters to hear really a particular point of view that informed their reporting. So, I mean, I think if you opened up all reporters' emails, I think you'd see all kinds of things that some reporters don't even have to be comfortable with. Publications don't even agree on what some of these terms mean. Some publications off the record means you can never use it whatsoever. Some publications off the record means you can use it to inform your reporting, but you can't quote it. I mean, let's just drop the pretense here.
Yeah, don't get me started on the need for universal agreement, uniform standards on sourcing arrangements. But really what's, I think, important here is what you said was oftentimes you will run by your source or experts, great timing for a car to zoom by, you'll run by your source or experts to make sure you got it right. So if Adam or a reporter were to say, is this sound, do I look like an idiot if I write this? The terminology that Adam used, and I'm trying to picture how I would have imagined him working. Him using that term that you called obsequious is done, he's doing it tongue in cheek, and he's saying, like, Bruce, like right. Almost like, ha ha, you're my editor now. He's not asking. Adam Schefter doesn't need to bend the knee to anybody. And he's certain, and think what you will about Bruce Allen, and everybody's got their thoughts for sure about him. But it's not like Adam is asking for Bruce's permission. And it doesn't, and my friends at Joe Buck's fan made a great point yesterday. It doesn't mean that he took Bruce's editing input. He's just saying, does this sound right? Right. So that's
I've had the reverse happen, the opposite happen, where a reporter writes a story in an uninformed way, never called, never consulted anyone, and wrote a factually incorrect story. And then if they just picked the next, I will
I'll take the time.
I'll say, hey, you got your point of view, I get it. But when you're just completely off base on basic facts because you didn't pick up the phone, that, to me, that's a worse problem than soliciting input. And again, nothing said he took everything Bruce Allen said and
all right,
like he was his editor.
I know we're pressed for time here, so here's hurry up offense. A couple more thoughts here. Adam has the reputation, has the scoops, he has the track record, he has the trust and loyalty of so many, not because he's shady, but because he is not shady. Okay. There are going to be, there's nobody more self-righteous than reporters. And these self-righteous scribes will dismiss disruptors and industry leaders until they're working for them. That happens over and over again. And I remember seeing it in Tampa. People didn't want bloggers to get media credentials because they weren't with newspapers. Now some of those reporters are out of business and working for those blogs that they used to badmouth. I'm not joking. All right. So there is a disconnect between how upstanding the media pretends to be, and then the reality that they continue to be oblivious to, which is that the trust is broken, the rules are changing, we're in the middle of disruption. And I think you would agree, Jeff, that the unethical crap that we've witnessed from journalists across politics and sports would render this, child's play. Oh, I shouldn't have made a Chucky reference with child's play, but would render this to be, very, very small potatoes. Look at his track record. He gets it right, and he gets it like he runs circles around everyone else because he's good at what he does, because he isn't a dick. And the final thing I'll say is, years back, there was, I believe, a Real Sports piece on HBO where they went into Jay Glazer, and Jay does a similar thing to Adam, but with a different style. And I'll say this as a former PR guy, and I really like Jay a lot, consider him a friend. He bypassed the PR departments and went right to players. He worked out with players. He trained with players. He'd show up and show up to practice or training camp, and I wouldn't even know about it and have access and all these interviews lined up. And it would drive the PR guy crazy because we want to control it. Well, lo and behold, there's a story on HBO where Peter King, who's one of those old school establishment reporters who wants to be as snarky and condescending as humanly possible, and then expect access no matter what he says. And that's a different episode. But he, at the time, I believe, was griping about what Glazer doing was what Glazer was doing was unethical, because he was trading on personal relationships. King also, I should mention, before I got in the NFL, I remember going back and forth with PFT as a commenter one time where I want to say that Peter King decried somebody having a relationship with, I want to say it was like Jay Feely, who was a kicker, and essentially that there needs to be an arm's length distance between reporters and who they cover. And I understand that coziness and cronyism is no good, and it does more harm than good in journalism and other businesses. But I love that some journalists will say out loud that it's supposed to be adversarial. It's supposed to be antagonistic, right? No, who said that? Did they teach you that in journalism school?
Well, you have to have, there's a relationship of trust that has to be there. I get nervous when I'm talking to a reporter I don't know, because I don't know how they work. It's a relationship of trust, and they don't know me. They don't know if I'm full of it or not. And so politics is a relationship business. Journalism is a relationship business. Good journalists spend a long time developing trust and developing sources.
Yeah.
So and then the same thing happens. The Glazer thing that happens all the time on the Hill, because reporters have unfettered access to members of Congress. Some members hand out their phone number all the time, and as a press secretary, you have a heart attack because you don't know who'd your boss talk to in the hallway when you weren't around, just because you're trying to protect them from screwing up. I
promise is the last thing I'll say. That last night I'm having date night with my wife, and she asked, how my day was, and she had heard a little bit about what was going on with Gruden and all that, and that was of interest because of our Tampa history. And I said, I bet you know something the New York Times and all the people talking on Twitter don't know. And she said, what's that? And so I read her a passage of the New York Times story. Let me be delicate by saying that what Bruce Allen and John Gruden were talking about were ugly rumor, not ugly humor. Big difference. It actually renders what Allen said worse than just a bad joke or an insensitive joke. They were trying to indulge, perpetuate, advance ugly rumors, not dumb, antiquated
shock humor.
Yeah. Right. So all the coverage of this is off the mark by a good amount. And I wonder if the New York Times knew but couldn't, didn't know how to report. But it really was, it it renders what Allen and Gruden did that much worse, in my view, at least.
Yeah, that we've talked about this off air, that context makes certain passages of that story have a completely different meaning to them.
Yeah. Anyway, this has been fun. Good catching up with you. I know we got you up early in Sacramento, but it's a lovely day here in Washington.
It's a beautiful, cool morning here. Now, this is a good, quick express edition of the pod.
Exactly.
And I always appreciate your insight from working in the league. It's a very unique perspective that goes right at the whole premise of this podcast, was the intersection of sports and politics.
Great. Thank you, buddy.
All right.
Always a pleasure.